morning and welcome to Limitless, the show that brings you love and inspiration on a Saturday morning. Today we have an amazing guest. Lee Jasper will be on the show with me in a few seconds. And he is, as we all know, he's a race and equality activist. And he'll be talking about education and just a few issues related to that. Now, let me just remind you and jog your memory as to who this man is. He is a he has been a consistent campaigner for social justice for over 35 years. He's a leading human rights activist and for race and equality and justice on behalf of Black and Asian communities in the UK. He's one of the founder of Operation Black Vote, senior political advisor and policy director for Equalities and Policy in London, served with our current Prime Minister when he was Mayor of London, Boris Johnson, director of the 1990s Trust, spokesperson for National Black Caucus, Mangrove Community Association. As a race and human rights activist, he has sat on many community groups such as the Metropolitan Police, Inner London Education Authority, the Royal Commonwealth Society. Let me just catch my breath. My goodness. He connected Nelson Mandela in support of the Stephen Lawrence campaign group. He, a child of the Windrush, a lover of all people, especially those who have been unfairly treated. Where do we go from here? He is an amazing achiever and a champion to the community. And of course, in 2010, he was awarded by the NUS Black Student Campaign in recognition of his contribution towards challenging racism in higher education. Without further ado, welcome my guest onto the show, Lee Jasper. Welcome.
Good morning.
Good morning, and thank you. Thank you for joining me. Now, Lee, you've done so much, my goodness, and so many people applaud you right now and have done for many, many years. Tell us how this started, because of course it displays you as somebody who's virtually limitless, and we can follow your footsteps and just learn from you. So tell us, how did you start? Tell us from the very beginning, your early childhood memories, some of the things that inspired you to go in the path that you did.
Well, I'm born in Manchester, which is in the north of the United Kingdom. Yes. My father is Jamaican. He lives in Jamaica now. My mother was half Sierra Leone, half English. Mm-hmm. Her father came from Sierra Leone as on merchant sea ships in about 1914. Married my grandmother in Manchester around about 1921, and settled there. My father came off as part of the Windrush generation in 1955, and we settled. And really, our household was one where my mother was a very strong matriarchal presence. She was the dominant presence in the house, and she was very much a champion of the underdog. And she would always urge me to defend people who were being bullied or to intervene if I saw something wrong. Or she was very much that sort of champion of the underdog. And I suppose that's rubbed up on me. When you were listening to radio or the TV, she would always be on the side of the person that was suffering the injustice. And as a consequence of that, I think it became almost part of who I was and who she was. And as I grew up older, I adopted that philosophical approach of saying, you know what, I think my vocation in life is to defend those who find it hard to defend themselves. And it has been a vocation, whether I've been paid or whether it's been unpaid. I've constantly committed myself to supporting people in crisis. So I think it's formally from the family. I had a troubled teenagehood, so as typical of many young Black boys at the time. I became a father by the time I was 15. I had 2 children by the time I was 16. I was married by the time I was 17. And I left school without any qualifications. I went straight into the world of work. In the 70s, you could leave school and almost walk into a job the same day, really. So it's not like today's economic circumstances. Became employed, and so on and so forth. Finally decided to go and get my education because everybody was telling me, you know, you're a smart kid, you should go and do something. So I eventually did and took a degree at Manchester University, and from there I moved to London. Once I came to London, I became involved in a whole series of black movements, the Stephen Lawrence campaign and lots of other campaigns around the country, supporting families who are fighting for justice. And that's been my story ever since, really, trying to amplify the voices of those who cannot be heard, or whose voices are refused an audience, and are seeking justice. And I've been doing that for some, 35 years now. So I'm long in the tooth, as if I should retire shortly to the next generation.
Oh, no, please don't. Carry on, please. No, it's good. It's refreshing and definitely inspiring the younger generation to pick up the baton as such and to carry on. Well, it's always nice to still see those that we're following, or those that others are following, still doing it, and still at, you know, in the game, and inspiring as well, so that more people can continue, you know, that sort of thing. So please do not retire from it.
I shall go on to write books, I'm sure, and do stuff like that. But yes, so yeah, that's been my vocation. I've been absolutely blessed with my career. Not only do I have a wonderful family, now married for over 35 years, grandchildren and great children. So I'm really blessed beyond money, beyond the material things of life. And I've had a career which has saw me go from very humble beginnings to having breakfast with Nelson Mandela, speaking on a platform with Fidel Castro, you know, marching and speaking to over 1 million people who opposed the Iraq War, freed innocent people from jail. I mean, the list goes on. So I've been very blessed in my career to date. And I think it is important that we do have examples for young people to aspire to, who feel the vocation to help others.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, it's a basic example of when your heart is set on helping others, when you're thinking about others and wanting to see, you know, a community, those who are weaker and haven't got a voice, perhaps, when your mindset is about supporting them, lifting others up, you will always find that there will be rewards beyond economic, finances. You know, it's just one of those things that circles around again. You know, you give out and it comes back to you again. You know, especially when you give out with the right motives, definitely.
I think that's right. I think that what I found in my life, if it's any inspiration to anybody, is that the more that I help others in a way that doesn't really, you know, one's not expecting anything back other than to assist in a selfless way, then the more you're rewarded in life. And it may not be what you want, but it'll always be what you need. Life as a way of reinforcing the good that you do will always come back to you. As I say, it may not be what you want. I always wanted a shiny red sports car. I've never had one, but I've got a great bicycle and it takes me everywhere.
Excellent. What you want and what you need. I like the fact that you've taken the conversation in that direction, because often what people want is based on the community they're living in, and advertising what is dictated to us as to what we want, what we think we're going to desire. And half the time when we get it, we're disappointed.
Well, I'm always amazed at the amount of people who are seeking to buy things they don't need to impress people they don't know.
Exactly. People that sometimes don't even care.
Exactly. I never compete with the Joneses or the Smiths or whosoever. And I think that part of having a sort of a mature outlook on life is actually being delighted for other people who achieve what they think they want. Yeah. But I'm also long enough to realize that sometimes when you think it's the house and the car and the holiday, when you get there, you know, it's not as fulfilling as your expectation might have led you to believe. So I think if you can come to be at peace with yourself, then you can live in a mansion or a hovel and you will be happy. But if you're not at peace with yourself, then money is not going to solve your problem.
Exactly. Exactly. And in fact, it could cause more problems, if anything. Now,
Absolutely.
I came across an article that was sent to me by one of my viewers that headed Black and Asian kids are not getting the care they need, and that nothing has changed since the 1990s. What do you say of that with your experience? Because I know that this is something that you've been campaigning for years.
Yeah.
Sometimes we wonder when every once in a while it comes back up again in the media. Has anything changed? Has anything progressed? Are we just, creating these different, these awarenesses, and then people are now saying, "Oh yes, that's a good thing to talk about," and then next minute it's forgotten, and we go back to we kind of like catapult back to the way it was again. What do you think about that statement in itself?
I think that certainly some things have changed. It would be churlish to say nothing has changed. I think things have changed. Certainly the level of Black children's education attainment has changed. It was lower in the 90s than it is today. So we give thanks to the fact that our children are becoming more educated, even if it's not quite where we want them to be. And I think within our communities, with Black communities, one has to differentiate. If you're looking at African children, then they tend to do slightly better in relation to educational performance than British-born children who are Black. So I think it's a differentiated experience over the piece, but certainly we are nowhere near where we need to be in terms of offering the quality of education that our young people are going to need in what is a very, very complex and challenging world. I mean, my Lord, we thought our world was complex when we were growing up, but when you look at the challenges that young people face today, in terms of the pandemic, in terms of climate change, in terms of the economy, they really do have the kind of existential challenges that are way beyond the comprehension of most of the people of my age group, born in the late 50s and 60s. So you do need that quality education. And of course, what we do see is a continual repetitive cycle of high Black school exclusions. There is the issue of the school exclusion classroom to prison pipeline. Like if you're excluded from school very early on, you are more likely to get snared up in the criminal justice system later on. And of course, even for those who do succeed, such as Black graduates, it's 34% unemployment amongst Black graduates. These are people who've gone on and got their education and got their degrees. So we see both in the classroom, in terms of educational performance, we see in terms of future career opportunities, and we see in terms of a lack of Black teachers in the classroom. You were talking about examples early on, and great example to have a Black teacher and a Black male teacher, particularly a scarce individual in the classroom. But we do need to massively increase that. And what we've seen is those numbers actually reduce over the last few years. I think in 10 years, we made 0.5% difference. We improved by 0.5%.
Wow.
Between 2010 and 2020. I mean, the pace of progress is glacial. And I think we need to think as a community about much more radical interventions than we have previously. I know when I was growing up, we went to Saturday school, supplementary school. And it was and Sunday school, actually, Saturday and Sunday. But you went to Saturday school because your parents knew that it was important for you to get the right type of education that you needed. So that supplementary school tradition, I think, is very important. I think the Black church has got a magnificent role. 2 Black churches could open a school tomorrow.
Yes.
And they could focus on making sure that the curriculum, the pedagogy, the teaching style, the culture of that school was one in which was going to support Black children to succeed. So things have changed. We're not where we want to be, but thank God we're not where we used to be. And I think that probably gives the balance of where we are today.
Yes, most definitely. I think definitely within a successful Black church environment, there's always going to be more children, because people have gotten married, they're having children. There'll be more children. So we're definitely thinking about the future.
But not only that, but faith. Studies show that faith, whatever people's faith, children who have faith learn better and do better educationally than those with no professed faith. So to believe in something gives you the stability you need
Yeah.
to have an open mind for education.
Yes. There's a drive and a purpose. As
Absolutely.
opposed to, yeah, I will just figure that out when I get there. And if I get to prison, then nothing. That sort of thing. I see what you're saying, most definitely.
Yeah.
But what could be done in the actual classroom environment when we talk about they've come straight from home at 5 years old and they're going into school and they'll be in that school system for the vast majority of their childhood? What could be done now to make sure that in that environment where they spend the vast majority of their youth, things can change? You mentioned about getting more Black and male teachers. Why is there such a reduction, number one? And secondly, why are people not going into the actual educational industry? Why, from what you know?
Well, I think the pay is extremely poor, isn't it? I mean, if you're a
Mm,
teacher in some of the big inner cities like London, I mean, you're barely earning enough to pay your rent, your travel expenses, and your bills. So I think that the profession itself has just not kept pace. Teachers should be as valued as doctors, in my mind,
mm,
because they play an absolutely critical role. And you want the best quality teacher you
yeah,
can possibly afford to
mm,
teach your children. And I think with the low pay of teachers, that's certainly a disincentive to join the profession when you can do something else that'll probably earn you, a greater salary.
yeah,
In relation to that, but teaching very much like helping people is a vocation, isn't it? Some people
yeah,
are born to teach. That's
yeah.
what they do. But what we can do, I can tell you some personal strategies that I use. I'm a father of 9, 5 boys and 4 girls,
Mm,
and I was a school governor at every one of their schools. I made it my
mm,
responsibility, and not just to look out for my children, of course, that was the primary interest, but to look out for all Black children in those schools, to figure out
mm,
what we were doing in relation to the kind of inspiration and bringing successful Black men and women into the school. What are we doing about exclusions? How are we making sure that those that are lagging behind educationally can have the focus? These were all my primary interests on the schools that my children went to. But I
mm,
also think about, I always urging, and I was always surprised when I was a school governor, how few Black parents were engaged with the school around
mm,
their child's education. And the
mm,
difference is palpable. If you've got an active parent in a child's education, that child will perform, demonstrably better as
yes,
a consequence of that parental interest and involvement. So get to know your child's teacher on a first name basis.
yeah,
You understand me?
mm,
I was representing a parent yesterday, and she was completely intimidated by the homework that was being brought home by a child, and therefore the child was saying to mum, "Oh, I can't do the homework because of X, Y, and Z." Mum
mm,
didn't have the confidence to understand what was actually required of the homework, so
yeah,
didn't really enforce that. He didn't do the homework, and when we went to the school, I pointed out to the school that look, lots of people who have had a bad experience of secondary education in this country, or
mm,
may have not had be intimidated by all things academic. And let's
yeah,
face it, some of us are. Your child comes home with your maths homework, and you think, "Oh my gosh, what do I do?"
yeah,
But if the schools can support parents by having homework classes for the parents, so
mm,
this is what the homework is entailing. This is what will be expected. This is
yeah,
your whole, this is what you need to understand about the task. At least give parents a great deal more confidence
mhm,
in relation to help supporting their children with their homework. Another great idea that I saw in Hackney
mm,
was where a school allowed any significant other to a child, a mother, a
mm,
grandfather, an aunt, to
mm,
come into the school and just sit at the back of the classroom. And they said it had a remarkable effect on the behavior of the children when they knew that members of their family were sitting at the back very quietly, not doing anything, but they were observing and watching. And it made
mm,
a real difference. So I think these sorts of tactics are things that you can do on an individual level. I think on a more broader level, it's time that we opened our own schools and focused on providing just one example of how excellent our young people can be. Wouldn't it
yes,
be wonderful to have a Morehouse or a Spelman? These are historical Black colleges in America that
mm,
that the whole world wishes to attend. 1/3 of Morehouse's students are from China, from Italy, from Spain. They attract people from all around the world, even though they've got a black focus, because their education is excellent. And
Yes.
they can attract that. Wouldn't it be wonderful to have that kind of institution here in the United Kingdom, just so that we can show that actually, in the right circumstances, with the right support and the right teaching staff, our children can fly, amazingly high in relation to achieving their objectives. So, but I think at the end of the day, I never depended on the state to educate my children. I understand that they give them the education in relation to some of the formal matters of science and maths and trigonometry and history and so on. But there is a responsibility that I felt to make sure that my children had the skills necessary to cope with life.
Yeah.
I had to teach them a moral framework. I had to teach them personal responsibility. I had to teach them, about lying and telling the truth and what their responsibilities were to their family and their brothers and sisters and their wider community. I had to teach them about their African history because I knew they wouldn't get that in school. Yeah. So I don't depend. For me, the primary source of education is your family. Yes. That's moral education, that's cultural education, and so on. And then what the school gives brings added value to that proposition. But if you're dependent on the school to give your child everything that they need in relation to education, then you're playing a lottery.
Exactly.
And what I found is that all my children learned to read before they went to school.
Yes.
And it's taking that approach that the primary responsibility for their education is mine. And the school can play an important role in adding to your efforts.
Yes, most definitely. But then also, once they do get to school, they are there for a vast amount of time throughout the first, few decades of their lives. And sometimes the work that's done at home or done within the community, the church community, or wherever they go to, Sunday school, sometimes it can be untaught when there's different ideologies that do not reflect what they're learning at home. So as far as getting more people, from a diverse community that's represented within that school, what more could be done to attract people of, the minority groups that can become teachers, that we can actually be able to say, okay, once we send the children to school, they've got that, they're seeing leaders that look like them, and they can understand and aspire to that, and understand that actually they can also be leaders as well, because this is role modeling now, isn't it? And if in the fundamental place of authority they're not seeing people that look like them, that could be quite detrimental. I mean, I'm sure there's psychological things that can happen in the end, where they look at people of their own color or senior members of the community that are Black from a negative perspective, because they haven't seen that in school. They haven't seen that in any authority figure at school. So what do you think more that can be done, and how does the lack of leadership impact on young Black people?
Well, speaking for personally, I was born in England, so the first time I went abroad and to a Black society, to see everybody in power being Black, the doctors, and this was absolutely inspiring. So you can't doubt the power and potential of having these Black faces in high places within school and within society in general. So that's absolutely key. I think in terms of encouraging more Black people to get into the role of education, one, we've got to campaign that teachers are paid a better salary. I mean, the thing is that teachers are leaving the profession in droves. A, because it's so stressful. B, because it's so underpaid. And therefore, it's not really, it hasn't retained its attractive value. Coming from Africa, and if you've been to the Caribbean, teachers are valued in society. They're seen as very high profile people, and they're invested in. Whereas here, I think that teachers lost some of that status that it needs to have returned to it if we are to get the diversity in the classroom. But also schools have got to start thinking about how we positively reflect the communities we serve. Some schools are 95%, 90% Black and ethnic minority, pupils and 95% white teaching staff. That cannot be a sustainable position for a healthy school that is trying to inspire children from a variety of backgrounds. And so I think that looking at making sure that we've got the kind of recruitment drives in schools and in teacher recruitment that begins to pull in this diverse pool is absolutely key. But I think the most fundamental thing will have to be pay. I don't think it's a lack of ambition for people to want to teach. I think that people do want to teach, but I do think that currently the economics of it, they're just are not making sense for a lot of people. So I think that improving pay and conditions for teachers is very important. I think Black churches need to come together and provide an example of how an independent school might look like. You talked about competing ideologies. Well, there are faith schools, aren't there? Particularly for that purpose, so that you can ensure that your school reflects your particular faith and belief, Jewish schools, Catholic schools, and so on and so forth. So there are opportunities within the present system to have that focus. But I think that as a community, we're going to have to invest in our own children's education. And at the end of the day, if we can invest in supplementary schools on a Saturday, if we can invest in after-school clubs and homework clubs that can assist them, there can be you cannot spend enough of your time and money on investing in your children's education. So if we do that collectively, then we provide the kind of ecosystem support and safety net to encourage people to go into teaching and to support our children when they're in the classroom, when they face difficulties.
I know quite a number of teachers Black teachers have talked about the fact that in the position that they're in, they're not allowed or they're not given the opportunities for promotion.
Absolutely.
And so that's where the frustration has come in as well, where they're leaving now the profession, finding other things to do. Because if you're finding that you're in an environment where you're giving a lot of your time and a lot of your effort and just really quite passionate about it, and then of course when it comes to promotion, you're constantly being sidelined, you find that people are not going to be as motivated, and hence the leadership positionings is non-existent. Because I mean, I've only met I've only worked in, because I did a lot of teaching. I worked for, I think, 1 or 2 Black people in leadership in this country, and I did a lot of like contracts in different schools. And it's a difficult one, because that now goes towards, I think the next thing people will be saying is the government might need to step in on that, because the leadership positioning, I mean, you let me know what you think, but leadership is so important for pulling other teachers up, for even representing the community when it comes to the decision makers. I mean, what do you think about what could be solved with that? Because yes, the pay needs to come up, has to be increased, definitely. But like you said, it's a vocation. And, if people are doing it, then there will probably be a whole lot of people that will do it just because they want to do it to see a change, see improvement, see the community grow and develop. But if they're unfairly treated, then they're going to leave, or they won't put as much effort or try to rise up in any way. So what could the government do? I mean, because, okay, when we look at the fact that Britain, last couple of years, we saw about Black Lives Matter, but they mentioned the fact that Britain doesn't have as much of a problem as maybe in America. And this is what's been projected.
Yeah.
But some people wouldn't agree with that. So what do you think?
Well, I think that, it's like pouring good wine into a broken glass, isn't it? If you have an education system which doesn't retain the best of its talent, Black teachers, Black head teachers, Black teaching assistants. The unsung heroes of the school movement actually are Black teaching assistants. There's lots of them, and they never get any recognition, but they're often the most effective intervention with our children. But if you can't progress your career because of issues of racism or white privilege within the education system that is leading to you being overlooked, then that is going to be a disaster, not just for the school, but for you as an individual and the wider community. So I think the government could strengthen the employment legislation to protect black professionals and strengthen their ability to challenge racism in the workplace. As you know, anybody who makes a complaint about racism in a professional setting for black people, it's almost like a career decision. Do I really want to do this and make this complaint? Because we kind of know what the backlash will be.
Yeah.
And that's got to change, because at the moment what that means is that we're losing good talent who are not staying in the profession. Those that are facing their careers being stalled because their value is not being recognized and they're not getting promotion. And some of them are subject to disproportionate disciplinary and grievance procedures, which are unfair and point to double standards in their school. So government legislation around providing additional protection for racism in the workplace is very, very necessary. And we all can see, can't we, post 10 years of austerity and after the pandemic, that if you just leave things to go their natural course, black people are the last to be employed and they're the first to be let go. And we've seen black unemployment rise, throughout the couple of years of this pandemic. So finding ways in which the government can strengthen employment legislation is certainly one way. But I also think that black parents turning up to the school gate and being on the board and attending parents' evening and providing support for those lonely black teachers that are out there who rarely see parents, this has got to be key. We've got to gather around them and show the school that we support them, they're valued, and make sure the school knows, yes, we need more teachers like this. So it's also about parental activism in support of not just your child's education, but for all children's education, in terms of making sure that school understands the priority you attach to getting black teachers in the classroom.
Most definitely, making sure that we are visible in when the decisions are being made, and most definitely. Now, I mentioned before about the projection of like advancement abroad when it comes to fairness and equality. Do you think that that's realistic? Do you think that that is actually true, where we are in Britain far more balanced in the way we deal with this multicultural community that we have, as far as making sure there's fairness? Is it really that what's being projected, is that the reality?
Well, Britain is not a meritocracy, if that's the question that you're asking me. You don't simply proceed with talent. It's wealth, class, and white privilege that rule the day in the United Kingdom. So, the notion that Britain is a post-racist society or is somehow, one of the most advanced multicultural societies in the world, I think is undermined by the fact that when you see racial inequalities in this country, in health, in maternal health, in the first year of life, in employment, in education, then the figures are getting worse, not better. And I think the underlying driver for that, and students of history will recognize that, is the economy. When the economy is doing well, then obviously the effects of racism and discrimination are lesser mitigated on our communities. When the economy is doing badly, then we see an amplification of that disadvantage on our communities. And the pandemic has amplified our disadvantage to that extent. And communities are feeling increasingly under pressure. So Britain doesn't have this international reputation it likes to project about being a land, where the colour doesn't matter and one can proceed on the basis of merit and so on and so forth. These are largely myths about the United Kingdom. We have a great deal of challenge in relation to our politics, and you can see that by looking at the extent to which even those black professionals, whether it's in politics or in sports, who do really, really well, they're still subject to being dragged in the media, still subject to being undermined, still poor reporting, bad reporting, racist reporting in relation to them. So that just gives you an indication of the real state that we're in the United Kingdom. And I don't think we have much to shout about when it comes to race equality here in the United Kingdom.
I want to talk about identity and how a lot of we'll start with the young people, but I think it's a community thing as well. And I wonder sometimes whether that has something to do with the fact that you don't see as much parents taking, or people giving up statements like, oh, it's because they're racist. And that's where the problem ends. The comments that they're making is, oh, it's racism. And that's where it ends. Yes, there is racism, but my question is, okay, irrespective of racism, what are you going to do about it? What are you not going to do anything about it? So I think maybe the issues might be to do with identity. Do Black people see themselves, not all Black people, but I'm saying those who feel oppressed, see themselves as helpless, perhaps? Do you think that might have something to do with it, where as time has gone on with the system and how things are, perhaps there's this sense of this self-projection of being helpless and unable to do anything? And how can we combat that, if you think that's what might be one of the things that's plaguing our society?
Well, I think that is true, to the extent that, if you allow yourself to wallow in victim mode, then you become powerless to affect your situation. You've got to understand that you're fully entitled to all the rights, benefits, and citizenships and laws, and access to the laws and justice as anybody else in this country. And in fact, you probably, if you're from a Black and ethnic minority community, your history suggests you deserve it more than anybody else, given British imperial history. So I think that you do have to have that. But I think that, you have to go back to the essence of what has allowed us to survive through enslavement and through colonialism and through other bad times. That's been self-help. Self-help has been the thing that has sustained us right throughout those periods. And so to go back to look at how can we help ourselves? We're not powerless in the situation. If we come together and we work together as a community, we can solve the majority of our problems without recourse to asking government to intervene. And so I think that as we mature in this country, and let's face it, we've only been in the UK in really big numbers since the mid-50s. So we've only been here 50 odd years. But as we mature as a community, this principle of self-help, of opening our own supplementary schools, of opening our own businesses so we can employ those Black graduates who are not getting a fair shake in the employment market in positions, of opening up our own hospital and research centres. You can come to London, if you're a Jewish member of the Jewish community and you fall ill, you go to a Jewish eye hospital or a Jewish hospital. They have these resources. And what I think is very much in the United Kingdom, we're going to have to focus very much more on supporting and working together and helping ourselves to overcome some of the problems that we face in the community. But simply to wallow there and say, well, it's all racism, there's nothing I can do about it, I'm just a victim of it. That is the worst kind of victimhood that will amplify your exclusion from society and lead you to wallow in despair and a lack of hope. And certainly the one thing that we need much more of in today's society is belief and hope for a better future. And so to do that, a community needs to help itself.
Yeah, most definitely. I mean, I always go as far as to say, look at who you are as a person, as opposed to finding identity with how you look. If we look at, and I know some people would say, yes, but we have eyes and we've got to be proud of how we are. But at the end of the day, I could say that to anybody from any culture and any race and say, really, who are you? Are you the person that's within the skin that you are, or are you your skin? Or do you know what I'm saying? I think if we can,
I do, and I think you make a very strong point. And what the research shows us is just like faith. Children with faith do better in school. Children with a strong sense of identity do better in school. Because if you have a strong sense of identity, then you can withstand some of the challenges that come against you, knowing you put them in the right perspective, that your foreparents fought much harder odds than that, and they succeeded. And so you can afford to put that in its proper context. So identity, understanding your history, and this is very important when I said about taking primary responsibility for the education of your own children. They must know their history before they get to school. And I think that what you do see is that children and individuals who are very knowledgeable about their history are better able to stand the hostile environment, be that racism at work or racism in elsewhere. So having strong sense of identity is very much a key part of a self-help community.
Yeah, most definitely. And the whole idea of community coming together, being strong as one people and supporting each other is something that we've been echoing in this show for weeks, for months. It's so important, that we have that. Now, I know that you've spent some time in Africa,
Yeah.
and obviously around the world as well. But I want to look at Black politics versus white politics in relation to the way in which they deal with empowerment of young people, the way they deal with education. What would you say are the main differences? And obviously you see people in power in Africa because everybody's African. The vast majority of them is African. But then, of course, you've had experience in South Africa as well with the Nelson Mandela movement. So tell us, what do you see are the key things that can be adopted over here, perhaps, when we're looking at the Black politics way of dealing with things and the white political way of dealing with things?
Well, I just think that the African attitude to education is one in which it enshrines it into the very DNA and soul of families and elsewhere. The aspirations of Africans in relation to education is unparalleled, and they, as a community and as countries, will sacrifice and invest, often to their own detriment, to ensure that their children get the advantage that they need in life. So they understand the value of education, and that's the biggest difference that I've seen in relation to that. Of course, you've got Black teachers and schools and everything you would in African nations, and those things are important. But the one things I very impressed with, I always remember when my son, whose birthday we're celebrating today, we did some voluntary work in Ghana and worked at a school that was provided by the UN. And he said to me that a little boy with no legs on a trolley paddled 4 hours to school to get there, and then 4 hours back every day. Wow. And this had a profound impact on my son, who then said, this child is prepared to do all of this to get what little education he could get. It left him, and he still speaks about it to this day. So I think that the biggest difference is the attitude, which is education is your key. And if you can get education and you can invest in that and you can support your child in doing that, then your child can escape some of the issues that we've been speaking about this morning. And which we hope to see, eradicated in the future. So I think that the biggest difference was certainly the value of education, both within the cultural, political, and social context, and the value placed on teachers as primary people of importance in communities and society to be respected. These are some of the differences I see, profound differences I see.
Most definitely. And of course, leadership right at the top as far as politics in this country. It would help if we had a few more Black people as well that we're representing. Now, I'm saying that because I know you were a former Respect Party candidate in 2012. Yeah. Any chance of going for Prime Minister one day, maybe?
I think my days of politics may be behind me. Very much more, I'm interested in supporting the next generation of leaders. You need that wise counsel of experienced leaders who are there as an access point for the next generation of leaders who are coming up, so they can reflect, they can get good advice, they can get good counsel, and they can use their experience. So very much my thoughts these days is, how can I build legacy to support the next generation of leaders? And that's why we're working with, I support an organization called Black Impact, and it's an African Caribbean student network throughout the United Kingdom in England and Wales. And we're through them, they do the class of 2020, 21, 22, so the best African and Caribbean students in the country get recognized and voted on and so on. But they are developing an international partnership with African universities and African American universities to build a leadership platform that will bring all the African diaspora, people from the continent together to talk about issues of ethics and leadership and governance. And I'm very much committed to working with that initiative to provide a sort of global perspective among myself, amongst others from around the world, to ensure that this new generation of Black Lives Matter activists have that benefit of wise counsel, experience, and somebody to talk to when difficult decisions come along. So that's where I am. I'm building legacy. So I'm I want to be a kingmaker, not necessarily the king.
Amazing. That's, it's the same attitude that we started with, where you talked about wanting to help others, imbibing the attitude that your mother, the way your mother was, and how you picked that up as well, wanting to push and help other people. And that automatically makes you a servant leader.
Yes, exactly.
You're serving, but you're leading as well. What
Yeah.
better person to run a country?
What better person? Yes, well, some would say, I mean, getting ethics and vocation in public life. We've got too many politicians and not enough statesmen and women. We need the people who have got a vision for the community beyond their own individual political or economic success. And
exactly, more statesmen, less politicians, most definitely.
Absolutely.
And that's the problem that we have now. But you will find that when you go to the churches, people of faith who do genuinely have a heart for the community are the ones that are more thinking about future generating. How do we help the future generation? How do we help the now? How do we bring people up? How do we build people? And there's been this talk in the church community where leave the politics to the politics, and we are, we're church people, we're clergymen. What do you think about this thing about people of faith moving towards politics? Because I would say that would be the best place for some of them who are called to that to be, because then they bring in an attitude, they bring in the mindset that promotes support for everyone and inclusivity, and making sure that there is a balance in the community, and it's not just to win a vote. What do you think about that?
Well, I think that, in terms of the African diaspora, and of course, most notable is Dr. King in America during the civil rights struggle, is that they brought the moral dimension, the moral gravitas, the moral vision to the struggle for equality for African Americans. And I think that the church has got a role. God, I always say that Jesus Christ was a revolutionary. He didn't come to see society and be content with what he saw. He came and saw and decided it needed changing. And such was his commitment to that change that he put himself in mortal danger in order to make the point that the change needed to happen.
That's right.
I think that, the church has to rediscover its moral mission, which is about looking at the gospel as, a progressive, fair and just framework in which to prosecute, modern politics. So I think faith has got a long role to play. And in some senses, you and I know, faith leaders are more supported and more trusted than politicians. And therefore, they've got an additional burden of responsibility of how to say, how can we get involved in politics that, in a way, as Dr. King did, that would make a material difference for our children's futures and improve the country as a whole, as well as, eradicating some of the evils of racism. And it can be done. Dr. King didn't just fight for Black people, he changed world history because of his mission and his purpose. And I think that very much now churches have sort of become sort of mini competing units rather than a collective. There is no such thing as the Black church, I keep saying. What you have is a series of individual churches, some smaller, some bigger, but it's a sort of wide federation. I think that very much, going back to the pastoral doctrines of Dr. King, would be a huge, huge support to the community. And I think it's part of the church returning to the basics of its moral mission.
And recently, last year to be precise, we had Nim Sabonga, who was actually running in politics, and that was ignored by many. Because I know it was because if the majority of similar faith people went out and voted for him, he would be in a position now where to actually start making some of the changes that we've discussed today. But the fact that there are so many people of faith, Black and white, because we're looking at a community of people that have the same belief, that share the same ideology, the same, they're projecting the same thing through Jesus Christ. And that's what NIMS represented, all being the fact that he was a Black man, which is another thing. I don't like to identify people by color, but you know what I'm saying, obviously. there are hundreds of thousands of people of different ethnic, culture and background that had the same ideology and thinking as him, but yet we don't see him having won that election.
No.
So
I always remember when the first black mayor of Chicago was elected in the mid-50s, Harold Washington, and the black church urged him to run, and he initially said no. He then agreed. He said, "This is what I need to run. I need your complete support and confidence, because I'm going to have to deal with people who you may not ideologically agree with, and come to some sort of alliance with them. I need your support that I won't be undermined in that process.
Yes.
I need $250,000 in a bank account, because politics is expensive and we need to run this campaign professionally. And I need your full support as church leaders." They didn't give him it, but they came back 6 months later when things got really rough, and they said, "We're prepared to do this," and they did it, and he became the first black mayor of Chicago. So I think there are lots of lessons in that that aspiring pastors and who want to be politicians need to look at. Is that, first of all, you must consolidate your support base. Once you consolidate a support base, then you need the finance. Once you've got the finance, then you need 100% support. That when you talk to other communities, whether it be Muslim communities or women's communities or lesbian and gay communities, in order to make some sort of alliance that can move things forward, that you will not be criticized by your colleagues. And I think that Harold Washington gave us a template, really, of how successful politicians should approach these things.
Most definitely. And as you mentioned, if we look back at even the birth of the Catholic Church and Constantine, and the mere fact that he wanted to be one of the greatest leaders in Rome, and how he then brought everybody together to become Christians, to become Catholics, and then won. It's the same thing. You need unity. We can't all fight in our corners, because we know what happens when we're divided.
Absolutely.
So,
I think young people get that. Young people these days, I think, do get that, and they've got the technology and the wit and wherewithal to pull it together. But I think what they need is just that overall guidance and that historical perspective that can allow them to make informed decisions about whatever they choose for their future. And that's why I talk about this wise counsel, this legacy element, that it's like the village advisors, where you sit around the tree and discuss an issue that affects everybody and come to some conclusion. That's the kind of support our young leaders need today. And you know what? There are some radical young preachers out there who are preaching the gospel of King, and doing it in a way that is very, very immediate and visceral, like creating credit unions, support their parishioners by providing mental health advice for their parishioners, or providing school supplementary education. I mean, there are some churches that are magnificent examples of what the future should look like, but it needs the body of Christ, the whole of the church, to deliver the vision. And what we have is isolated examples of excellence, surrounded by seas of mediocrity. And I think we need to build a bridgehead between the two.
I like the fact that you also mentioned kingdom, because when we come into Christ, when we come into Christianity, we're dealing with a king. We're talking about kingdom mentality. Even the Lord's Prayer is talking about "Let thy kingdom come." It's all about kingdom. It's all about getting into a position where we are in places where there are decisions are being made, where the policies are being created, where we have to have a presence. If we don't have a presence, then we don't have a voice.
No, that's absolutely right. I mean, the famous saying, isn't it? If you're not at the table, it's usually because you're on the menu. And I think that holds quite true. But I think that getting people into positions of power. You see, if you have a policy of just high faces in black places, black faces in high places, it won't deliver, because you don't have the church movement or the community movement backing it in a holy and substantive way. So when people come under pressure as individuals, they're isolated as individuals.
Yes, and can easily be pulled down.
Whereas if they're part of team, a broader team, then people know, oh, that individual is linked with the community or organization, and therefore we need to be very careful about how we proceed. Yeah. But it provides a degree of assurance and reassurance that we need. And I think at the moment, we're sort of bought into a black superstar notion, where we think an individual, a charismatic individual, is sufficient enough to be able to make the change. Whereas what you really need to think about is, if you create the movement, then the individuals will emerge from that. It'll be obvious who those leaders are, with their commitment and their energy and so on, and their ethics. And so I think that creating the movement is the first priority, and then you're absolutely guaranteed a whole host of leaders who will be able to emerge and feel confident about getting involved in the world of politics.
Amazing. You've literally taken the conversations we've had in the last couple of weeks and summed it up so nicely. Thank you so very much for being an amazing guest today, Lee Jasper.
No worries. I thoroughly enjoyed it.
How can and so have I, how can my viewers support whatever you're doing, follow you? How can we connect with you on social media?
I'm one of the most social media connected people on the internet. So if you Google in Lee Jasper on Twitter or Instagram or Facebook or YouTube, you're going to find me. Yeah. So I'm easily contactable. Just Google Lee Jasper and it will all come up for you.
Thank you. Thank you so very much for coming on the show. It's been my pleasure. And I look forward to having another chat with you again soon.
I do indeed. Maybe we can talk about the first Black Prime Minister at some point in our lifetime.
Yes. Yes.
Have a great day, and thanks very much for having me.
Okay. Have a great day. Bye.
Bye.
What an amazing show we've had today, and a really interesting talk, a lot to think about. And we concluded this with kingdom mindset, kingdom mentality, all coming together as one people. This is the very thing that the scriptures are talking about. And as Christians, this is what we need to imbibe into our mindset, into our teaching, into our understanding. The nature of Christ, he was a king, the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. And so therefore, in the image of God, we need to emulate this servant leader mindset, where we're serving a community from the front. And I think we're going to get there. I believe that in Jesus' name, we will achieve all these things, but we have to change our mindset first to allow ourselves to be changed, molded, and renewed, which I believe that as soon as we make that change, that decision, we will be. So this is me, Reverend Maria Bond, saying it's been an amazing time spending with you, the viewers, and I look forward to seeing you again next week, same time and same place. Until then, goodbye and God bless you. Limitless is a motivational talk show where I interview celebrities to find out what is the secret to their success. So make sure you join me every Saturday at 10 a.m. on LCBN TV.